to the Wine Nirvana podcast. Wine reviews for the average wine drinker. No pretense, no snobbery, no numerical ratings. And here's our host, Stephen Hawk.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, it is me, Stephen Hawk, your wine guru. My guest today is Mr. Brian Carter. Brian is a pioneer of the Washington wine industry. He started in 1980, and even California had a young industry then. There were 16 wineries in Washington, and there are 1,000 now. So Brian was very much on the leading edge. He is a champion of blending wines and has received many accolades. He is the only three-time winner, grand prize, at the now defunct Pacific Northwest Enneological Society, also known as the Seattle Enneological Society competition. He was twice touted as Winemaker of the Year by Seattle Magazine. He was the honored vintner at the 2007 Auction of Washington Wines, and he received the prestigious Industry Service Award from the Washington Association of Wine Grape Growers. In 2015, Wine Press Northwest selected Brian Carter Cellars as its Washington Winery of the Year, and in 2018, the Northwest Wine Summit named Brian Carter Cellars as the Winery of Distinction. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Stephen. Glad to be here.
Unlike in Europe, where winemaking is centuries old and often operations are passed down through the generations, in the United States, the wine industry is much more entrepreneurial. And for many producers, they get into it as a second career, sometimes after having a successful business operation.
That's right. How to make a small fortune in the wine business. Start with a large one.
Exactly right. So you yourself started as a microbiologist. How did you transition then into becoming a winemaker? And why were you drawn to wine?
Yeah, that's right. I have a degree in microbiology from Oregon State University. I was fortunate enough in my junior year at Oregon State to take a class in wine appreciation. I went out and visited these pioneer winemakers at the time. This was in the mid-'70s. There was just a handful of wineries in the Willamette Valley at that time. But winemakers like David Lett and Bill Fuller and Dick Erath and Charles Curry and Ron Volchek, I met these guys, and I saw what they were doing, and I said to myself, I want to do that. It's cool. So fortunately, they were. I made some friends out of a few of them, especially David Lett. And David Lett had gone to UC Davis, and he said, "Well, if you really want to become a winemaker, you should go to UC Davis." So I applied to go to UC Davis, and was fortunate enough to get into their graduate program. And I spent my senior year as one of probably the first student at OSU to take some classes independent classes in winemaking. I found somebody who was there who, interestingly enough, was a teetotaler, but he was a member of the American Society of Enology, and so I used to read Amarene and O, and then once a week I'd go in and talk to him about winemaking. It also dates back a little bit to when I didn't ever think about it as a career earlier on, but I did make some wine, like blackberry wine and rosehip wine, dandelion wine, back as a teenager. And had some fun making wine and kind of just enjoyed the process.
All right, very interesting. What's the one thing that you wish you had known at the beginning of your wine journey?
Oh, well, winemaking has been a lot of fun, and what I didn't realize and I, I don't, I'm not going to get a lot of sympathy from other small business owners because they all know this already. But running a small business is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time and energy, and things like managing payrolls and insurance and personnel and all that stuff. It can eat you alive. So it seems like these days I'm spending as much time doing that as I am doing winemaking.
Yes, I have to say, not surprisingly, because of course the business side of the business is always it's always essential and usually a lot less fun. That's for sure.
Right, and they didn't warn me about that when I was at school at Davis. They didn't. Yeah, they didn't even tell me, like, well, you're going to have to spend hours ordering corks and glass, bottles, and you have to deal with label producers and trademark attorneys, and the list goes on.
Indeed, yeah. It is amazing the number of people who go through the wine education program at UC Davis. I mean, it is a long list.
Yeah. Plus, they have other programs other than Davis. There's a Fresno program and some other schools in California. Plus, WSU right here in Washington State has a program that's quite a good one, and we've got a lot of people entering the industry here from that program.
Oh, that's interesting. I was not aware of that. It seems to me if you're going to, maybe if you're going to make wine in Washington, that would be the place to get the education, so you're close to the resources.
I think so. I think there's definitely an argument to be made for that. I mean, it's having been at UC Davis, it probably still remains the best program in the country. Certainly from the technical standpoint, maybe not the practical standpoint. I enjoyed my time at Davis. I learned a lot, and I'm still using a lot of that stuff.
Although you didn't get a heads up on the the business demands, what was the best advice you got when you were starting out?
Wow. Well, it's interesting because, again, there's a lot of stuff that I was told back then that really didn't apply. They were super cautious. So, for instance, they would say, you always have to inoculate your fermentations. Don't ever let them go native. Lees are kind of dangerous. Let your get your wines cleaned up as quickly as possible. Forgetting some of the stuff or denying some of the stuff that I learned is down there has also, but that's just sort of the evolution of the industry that it goes through. And I guess if you're going to teach somebody something, you want to teach them to err on the side of caution. But I've also heard it said that, the people who, stick to their winemaking that they learned at UC Davis, the wines tend to be a little bit, monolithic or not diversified. That didn't exactly answer your question, but I would say, be cautious is still good advice. There's a lot of ways you can go wrong, but don't be afraid to experiment. And that sort of scientific background of try some things, keep learning. If you stop learning, the winemaking gets boring. You got to keep trying different things and keep striving to make your wines better all the time.
Sure. I mentioned at the top that you were a champion of blending. You don't even make a single varietal, do you?
It actually, that isn't true anymore, Stephen. I was Washington's first winery to focus exclusively on blended wines. But after a few years, I decided that, there are wines that can stand on their own. And why not? So there were some friends of mine who got hold of me and said, "Hey, what are you doing making varietal wines again?" But I come across a lot of wines, and it's so outstanding. It didn't really necessarily work into the blend I was making, but to either bottle it on its own or blend it into what we call our abracadabra blend, which is kind of all the little bits and pieces that are quote left over after I finish all my other blending. So I started a program, and actually we have a very successful little program where we release 2 or 3 varietal wines every year, usually just tiny amounts, maybe 100, 150 cases.
But the emphasis is still on blending. So why don't you tell us about what you're attracted to by blending?
Sure. Well, when I first started Brian Carter Cellars, I was definitely thinking about, what can I do to set my winery apart? I just want to do the same thing that everybody else is doing. Why not do something a little bit unique? And so I thought about, well, and also I want to do something that's fun. And I also want to do something that works well in Washington. And I thought back over the wines that I've made, and I thought to myself, I really like blending. I like the process of blending. And I like the wines I've made using blending. And it turns out that Washington is a great place to make blended wines. In particular, if you look at the Bordeaux varieties here in Washington State and the Rhone varieties, which are 2 regions in Europe that France in particular, that really focus on blends. Those varieties really do well here in Washington State. And so I went out to restaurateurs and wine writers and distributors, and I said, well, hey, I'm thinking about starting a winery focusing just on blending. What do you think? And they said, great. They said, that sounds like a great idea. So the other thing that I would say about one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is because I described myself earlier as kind of a scientist, this microbiologist guy, and who does everything, kind of by the book. But blending is more like making a painting. It's very artistic. And there are winemakers, when they sit down to blend, that they have, all the analysis run in front of them. They got alcohols and TAs and pHs. And, last year my blend was a 3.58 pH. I'm going to try and blend to that number again this year. Well, that's silly. What matters when you're blending is what tastes good. And so I spend days blending each one of my core blended wines. Because one day, you might come up with one thing, and then another day you might come up with another. But basically, I'm just doing it hedonistically. What do you like, Brian? What tastes good today? Let's try a little of this. Let's try a little of that, and let's compare them. Let's try this Cabernet Merlot blend at 20% Merlot, then 24% Merlot, then 28% Merlot, and 32% Merlot. See which one tastes the best. And so it is an experiment, but it's really based on more organoleptic and sensory characteristics than it is on brain power. And the other thing I must say about blending is, it increases you're able to increase the balance of a wine. I really focus on that a lot. I start with the core varietal, and then I say to myself, well, what can I do to make this better? What can I make it to make it a more balanced wine? What can I do to make it a more complex wine? For me, the best wines are those that speak a lot of things, like good food. Food is always in my background too. Is when I'm thinking about, I often bring in food when I'm doing the blending, or I take home the blends and taste them while I'm having dinner. And because it's really not wine by itself that matters. It's wine and how it pairs with food, I think, that matters.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Essentially wine is food, and pairing it with what you're eating it's just one of the great pleasures of life, for sure.
And you talked about, how important wine is, of course, in European culture, and for me, it's for those cultures, they're really focused on food, I think. And so I'm thinking about, with my Celeste blend, for instance, which might go well with a really nice steak. For my Oriana blend, I'm thinking what goes well with crab cakes. For my Byzance, I like that with duck, and or chicken. It's sort of, not that it's just focused on that one thing, but if it works with duck, it'll probably work with chicken and turkey, for that matter. So so it's really important. And again, the wines that really stand out to me have a lot of things going. They're complex. They have characteristics. Not one characteristic that hits you over the head. It's not blueberries. It's not oak. It's not alcohol. It's not tannin. It's all of those things, and the more different things that come out, and especially as a wine opens up in the glass, there's oxygen introduced into it, and the wine goes through this evolution. It's a beautiful thing that happens.
Since you approach the blending more serendipitously, how do you balance getting the best taste out of a wine with a consistent year-to-year product, which I'm sure many people are going to look for? Like if they discovered one of your wines, they're going to expect it to be, kind of the same year in and year out.
That is an excellent question, and every so often, when I'm blending, I'll do a lot of different things. I mean, the night before, if I'm blending my Rhone blend, I'll open up a bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape and drink that with dinner. Because I'm influenced by not just wines that I've made. I'm influenced by Rhone blends made all over the world. But I will frequently open up a vertical of blends that I've made in the past. Once I've got the blend pretty close to where I want it, I'll go back and taste. And am I really breaking here with tradition? The nice thing about wine, of course, is that every vintage is different. If you're making Budweiser, every batch has to taste the same.
Right.
And fortunately, with winemakers get they get that sway of being able to make wines for the best that the vintage can produce. And I often end up with a situation where I've got two glasses in front of me, and the glass on the left is more similar to what I've done in the past. The wine on the right, I like it better. And as long as it isn't like a dramatic change, I'll pick the one that I like better. Not only do vintages change, but winemakers change. And darn it, I think we have a right to change our palates evolve like everybody else's palate evolves. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the wines I'm making now are identical to the wines I was making 15 years ago, because my palate has changed a little bit. And maybe that bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape that I had the night before, whereas the other time where I blended it was a Gigondas. That could have affected me, and maybe the food I had affected me. But definitely, there's no question, all of our palates change. People do have their favorite vintages that I produce, but very few times have one of my fans come back to me and said, "Hey, that 2016 that you made it just doesn't cut it. It's just not what I'm used to."
Yeah, it just ain't happening. So yeah, but I think that makes perfect sense, because as skills and experience change, yeah, it's bound to have an effect if you're paying attention, basically.
One more thing that I think worth mentioning is that I don't change vineyards a lot. Now, I do buy from a lot of vineyards. The very act of blending actually makes wines more consistent from year to year than if you're a winery that is a estate vineyard and you only source your grapes from that particular vineyard. Your wines are probably going to vary more from year to year than mine do, because they often say the best wines come from in the cool vintages, the warmer sites, and in the warmer vintages, the cooler sites. So I'm able to sort of compensate for the vintage variances by going in and plucking out the lots that I particularly like in that given year, and trying to get a little bit more consistency that way. I usually have my favorite source for a particular variety, but I have some secondary sources as well that I can tap into, especially if we have a really outside of the norm vintage, like a really cool vintage, all for a little warmer site.
With 4 decades of experience in Washington State, I've heard that you have really in-depth grower relations, really all around the state to draw from.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have my favorites, and like I say, I don't switch a lot. But I often say there's three different things that I look for. When I'm looking for a particular site, the variety that has to be well adapted to that site. So I sort of have my terroir that I look for a given spot. Like for instance, I like a pretty cool spot for Sangiovese, and then I need to have a grower that really knows what he's doing. And there's a lot of growers out there that have been doing this almost as long or longer than I have, so that helps a lot. And I joke about it a little bit, but the third thing I ask for is that a grower really be a good grower to work with, and it will listen to me, and will understand what it is that I want, because there are growers out there who know what they're doing, but and they produce a consistent product year after year, but what I might want is not necessarily exactly what the next winemaker might want. So if I want a little adjustment in the pruning or a little adjustment in the irrigation, that they'll respond to that. Oh, and there's a fourth thing, and that is that it need to be nice people to work with, because life's short if to deal with people that aren't fun to deal with.
It certainly is. Yeah. The last thing you want is an adversarial relationship, because that's just maddening for sure. These days there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability, organics, biodynamics, that whole thing. And so how much are you involved with that and, with your growers in that regard as well?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you should ask. I am actually on the board of the Washington Wine Industry Foundation, and one of their committees is the Sustainability Committee, and I am on that committee. And we've been working hard in conjunction with other organizations in the state, like the Washington Wine Growers and the Washington Wine Commission, to put together a program, a certified program for Washington State. There was a program in place, which was purely voluntary for both winemakers and growers, but now, particularly on the grower side, the ball is rolling for. Everything should be in place, and the money's in place. We just raised $180,000 in order to make this vineyard sustainability program that is certifiable, and put that in place. So it's looking good. And so 2021 will be the first vintage. I think that there's a few trial vineyards that will be going through this first phase of certification in 2021. So it's very exciting. And it's not there yet. I've been working with growers for quite a few years, and always work together with them to try and limit the number of pesticide sprays that they're using. Most of them are really on that, but it's not going to be long before I'm going to go to my growers and say, hey, are you part of this program? And if you're not, I'm afraid I'm going to have to look elsewhere, because it is my goal to have that sustainability emblem on my labels going forward.
Well, that's a major advancement, because in California there are a number of rules already in place. So I would think for Washington to join that movement formally is probably going to be good for everybody and lead to higher quality wines. I
think so. Higher quality and better for the environment. The nice thing that I like about the word sustainability is it takes all aspects into consideration: the environment, the workers, the longevity. It's got to work for the business aspect of it as well. So it really, as opposed to say organic, which I think is much more limited in its scope, this is really taking all aspects of how the sustainability is going forward, and can we make this system work for years and decades to come.
So what is your biggest challenge now? What keeps you up at night?
Well, I mentioned running a business, so we're obviously in this COVID thing these days, and it's caused a lot of challenges. Applying for these PPP loans and SBA loans, and to having to do with that stuff to try and keep my business rolling. So profitability in this day and age is challenging. Our tasting rooms have been closed. We're still only open at 25% occupancy in Woodinville, and we just opened, I guess tomorrow is when we're going to be opening down in Vancouver. I have 2 different tasting rooms in Washington State now, and depending on what region you're in, they're opening up at a different rate. So that's I would say it's not like winemaking doesn't ever keep me up at night. I've got malolactic fermentations that I wish were through, and there's always that one lot of grapes that came in that wasn't exactly what you wanted, and so there's all that stuff. But running a business and dealing with accountants, and I just completely revamped my chart of accounts, and I hired a whole new accounting firm, and it goes on and on.
No doubt. Of course, obviously the whole COVID thing has been burdensome for so many people, and we're not out of the woods yet, but hopefully not too much longer, because it has been really challenging for so many people. What's the one common myth about a life in wine that you would want to debunk?
Well, I mean, I hate to go back to the same old issue. I mean, I feel really good about having been a winemaker. I'm and a winemaker in Washington. I'm so glad that I came to Washington State. It's such a great place to have been making wine and see the evolution of the industry as it's gone. And they say, the winemaking business is romantic and everything. And, I tell people, when I first meet them, when they say, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a winemaker. And they say, oh, God, that was so cool. How do you, that's so romantic and everything. It can be romantic. When I'm doing a wine dinner and stuff like that, I can go to, great restaurants and talk to chefs, and it can be fun. 2%, I think, of my job is the romantic part, and 98% is just a lot of hard work. And even if you're a winemaker who doesn't have a small business, own the business like I do, and you're just maybe a winemaker who works for a larger operation, and you don't have to worry about payroll and all that stuff, it's a lot of hard work. You spend most of your time in the cellar setting up equipment, cleaning equipment, washing stuff. It's, sanitizing stuff. It's not a lot of fun, a lot of it. It's just making wine is a lot of hard work.
Yes, and I think that's something that many people don't realize. There's hard manual labor that has to be done in the winery and in the fields. You have to love doing it because it's a real commitment. There's no doubt about it.
I joke sometimes also that my next life, I'm going to be a diamond salesman, so I can just carry all my wares around in a little pocket or a purse. Wine is heavy. Schlepping all these cases around and shoveling stuff all the time and dragging hoses. I don't know too many winemakers that don't have back problems. And I've had 2 back surgeries myself.
Really? So you're a living testament to the impact that it has. Wow.
I'm also a rock climber and a mountain climber and a skier. And so I like the physical aspect of it. I mean, I don't shy away from hard work. I like climbing up the barrels and doing all that stuff.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really enjoyed it. There is a blog post on winerbana.com where I talk about Brian Carter Cellars and review 6 of his blends. Where can our listeners find out more about Brian Carter Cellars?
Yes, go to briancartercellars.com and check us out. You'll see some pictures of me enjoying myself out in the vineyard. You'll be able to read about all the different blends we do, from my Oriana Rhone style blend to my Tutto Rosso, which is a Sangiovese based Super Tuscan, to a Rhone blend, several Bordeaux blends, a Rioja style blend, which is Tempranillo based, our port blend. We make a lot of fun, different blends. So check them out online and then bring some home. And you can order online. And of course, I also very much want to, if you're in the area, please stop by. But if you're visiting after this travel ban gets knocked off, and you're able to come to Washington State, come and visit us. We're in Woodinville, which is just north of Seattle. Come and enjoy the great restaurants. Come to the San Juan Islands and enjoy the beauty here. And come to Woodinville and taste some wine.
Well, thanks again, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Stephen. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
And thank you for listening in. I will leave you with this quote from the great W.C. Fields. I'm reminded of my safari in Africa. Somebody forgot the corkscrew, and for several days we had to live on nothing but food and water.
This has been Wine Nirvana. To learn more, visit us at www.winenirvana.com.
This is a production of Habanero